Attack on Titan is officially over! For manga readers, us anime watchers have to wait until winter? Cruel, cruel world! Why is life so cruel? Was life even worth starting? And that leads us to the topic of today, the philosophy behind Zeke Yeager and his euthanization plan. So today I want to delve into Zeke, his psychology, and ultimately his philosophy. But in the process, I also want to have you answer a simple question.
Is math related to science?
But also I want you to answer, is Zeke's plan correct? Before we answer that question, we must first understand the logic behind Zeke's plan. To do this, let's first look at his psychology. As I said in my previous video about Attack on Titan, I believe one of the show's moral messages is that the argument for the greater good is a dangerous one. Every antagonist within the series uses this reasoning to commit heinous acts, and the one episode I think that exemplifies why this reasoning comes to fruition is the penultimate episode of Season 4, Part 1, entitled Soul Salvation. This episode explores the psychology of Zeke Yeager, an individual that we've seen throughout the series do absolutely horrid acts and be a major villain to the protagonist that we followed. He also throws horses like a pro. What a stud. Anybody get that? This episode takes us to Zeke's past, one in which he's living under the tyrannical rule of Marley and forced to live in one of their camps. Zeke, like all children, is innocent. We see that Zeke just desires the love of his parents, but because his parents are focused on their current situation and wish to save Eldians and Marley, they often ignore Zeke. Even worse than that, they often put this weight of saving Eldians squarely on his shoulders. Zeke's father tells him that he's going to save everyone. What he means is liberation, that Zeke will be some heroic figure for Eldians. And this idea, as we'll see, continues to stick with Zeke throughout the rest of his entire life. Zeke's story is clearly tragic. The way that he's treated and the decisions that he has to make are horrible. I mean, the only other story in anime that I can say is this sad has to be Naruto on a swing. Oh my god, look at him. This is definitely so sad that we need to see it 582 million more times. But really what Zeke's tragic backstory is doing is showing how one can be radicalized to think and do heinous things. Continuing through the episode, we eventually see Zeke meet Tom, lifesaver, screensaver. Tom isn't like the rest of the soldiers, not only because he held the power of the Beast Titan, but because he held very little interest outside of his research. Tom becomes a surrogate father figure for Zeke, and with Tom's suggestions and convincing, Zeke turns in his parents for scheming against Marley. Zeke choosing Tom in this scenario says something central about his character and ideology. Zeke views the rebellion against Marley as essentially pointless. We see this later in the episode when he's older. He views the Eldian race as cursed, that there's no way they can live good lives without immense levels of suffering. He also states that they're bad for the world. As a boy, Zeke felt trapped by the sentiments of his parents, that he had to be the soul salvation for Eldians. But Zeke's existence in Marley and how Marley treats the Eldians convinced Zeke that the Eldians are a danger to society, but also through his own lived experience that they live horrendous lives because of all of this. This fusion of empathy and radicalization becomes apparent when Tom reveals more information about the founding Titan to Zeke, that Eldian DNA can actually be changed. When this information is revealed to Zeke, both him and Tom come together to propose the plan that will come to consume the rest of Zeke's life. That being the euthanization plan. God, this video is going to get demonetized so quickly. The plan is that, through using the founding Titan's powers and altering the DNA of all Eldians, they will be forcefully sterilized. Jesus Christ. Zeke's argument is that the problem of the Titans in the world and the immense amount of suffering future Eldians will endure could be potentially negated if said Eldians are actually never born. Wow, pretty wild concept, right? That people shouldn't be born because of the suffering in life. It's very interesting how Isayama completely came up with this concept on his own and that there's actually no real— oh, what's this? Zeke. You dropped this. Hey, Zeke! 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 Antinatalism is a moral philosophical position that essentially states that no new life should come into existence because bringing a being into existence causes harm to said being. Not necessarily that the act of birthing causes harm to the being, it just causes harm to my eyes. Oh my gayness. The argument I'll be using is from David Benatar, who has a book about the subject entitled Better to Have Never Been. His argument relies on an asymmetry. Asymmetry just means that two things are not equal. So if you're a guy, it'll be me pointing out the fact that my cock is bigger than your cock. Why was that bleeped? I was just saying confidence. Also, I've got more confidence because I have a bigger dick. David Benatar's asymmetry argument is the following. Pleasure is a good thing. The absence of pleasure isn't a bad thing unless there's a person to experience that absence. Pain is bad. The absence of pain is a good thing, even if there isn't a person to experience its absence. So if you'll notice, the way that pleasure and pain are treated here is different. They're not viewed the same. This is the asymmetry. That a human that isn't in existence feeling pleasure isn't a bad thing, but a human that isn't in existence not feeling suffering is a good thing. Look, I know this is a lot. Wait, no, stay with me! Hello? Hello? Here's an example that is used by antinatalists and in a video that I'm linking below. If you were given the chance to experience the highest pleasures in life for 10 minutes, but after those 10 minutes, you then have to experience 10 minutes of the worst pain in life, would you choose to go through with that? For you anime fans, let me ask you a different question. Would you watch an episode of Fullmetal Alchemist, but then after, you have to watch an episode of X-Arm? I think I know my choice. David Benatar argues that most people wouldn't. With the first example, I don't know if David Benatar is an anime fan. Antinatalism, as is clear now, is a complex topic. It's been around for a long time, so I really do suggest you look up more on it if you're interested. Again, some resources are in the description. But the reason I'm using David Benatar's version is because it's the only one that appears the most similar to Zeke's philosophy. So you can now see then why antinatalists conclude that birthing a sentient being is bad then. Giving birth will inevitably result in the suffering of the being coming into existence, and even though there's pleasure involved in life, if you weigh experiencing pleasure and pain versus not having experienced either, the not having experienced pain becomes the moral action due to the asymmetry from earlier. We can see now why this ideology is almost identical to Zeke's. Zeke seeks to have Eldians not give birth because of the suffering that they will endure. Zeke's version of this is a bit different though. Zeke definitely makes it clear that he also believes that ridding the world of potential titans is a net good, and he also doesn't make it clear whether he believes anyone should give birth or if it's only focused on Eldians. So his argument could essentially be surmised as Eldians experience such immense levels of suffering that they shouldn't be brought into existence. The issue with this argument, to me, becomes apparent. If we're not just saying that suffering in general is always worse than pleasure, like the antinatalist argument that David Benatar argues, and we're just saying that an amount of it is, then Zeke could actually be committing an immoral act based on his own moral framework by sterilizing the Eldians. This would come about, say, if the Eldians do eventually become liberated. This would mean that the fact that stopping Eldians from being born was actually an immoral act, since the unborn Eldians no longer qualify under them experiencing immense levels of suffering. So, do I agree with Zeke or antinatalists? First, we need to contend with the fact that Zeke very clearly thinks that the ends justify the means here. Even if you view his goal as righteous and you agree with the arguments made by antinatalists, you get into severe problems with his means. He has a blanket disregard for life, so much so that he takes countless of them. From an antinatalist view, specifically Benatar's, this would still be wrong, because as the view expresses, the deprivation of pleasure is a bad thing for living beings. But I can already hear the responses. Well, Zeke did what he had to. What else was he supposed to do? Well, which is more important? Stopping suffering from occurring or not depriving living beings of pleasure? And this is my ultimate issue with antinatalism as a whole. Perhaps I'm reading the philosophy incorrectly, and if I am, let me know in the comments, but the focus on suffering from non-existent beings leads this ideology to some dangerous territory. If we're going to say that saving a future being from suffering is a good thing, that not giving birth is a moral good, then why couldn't we also say that ending all life on Earth is a good thing? I realize that the view says that the deprivation of pleasure is bad, so ending life is definitely a moral wrong to antinatalists. But if we weigh all of the deprived pleasure from ending all life on Earth versus all of the suffering that we would be negating from all future generations because none of them would be born, wouldn't the latter be more important? This is ultimately my issue with antinatalism. If you agree with the asymmetry argument that the lack of suffering, even from non-existent beings, is a moral good, I think it's definitely logical to reach the conclusion that I just made. So back to Zeke. For me, I reject this asymmetry argument on the grounds that I don't think we can consider the pleasure or suffering of non-existent beings. So if we reject the argument of asymmetry, what Zeke is doing is now obviously wrong. Not only from all of the pain and suffering that he's caused to potentially reach his goal, but there's also the issue of negated consent. Let's be clear here what the euthanization plan is doing. It's forcing large swaths of people, an entire race to be exact, to never give birth. I may hate babies, those little turd generators, but that doesn't change the fact that others put their happiness on the potential of giving birth and having children. I can't imagine the amount of suffering that forcing an entire race to not give birth would produce. I think that ethical choices can only be made regarding those who are here, that exist in the now. That suffering does matter, but only to the extent that we can reduce it for those around us, so that we may make the world a better place in the now, and that the reduction of suffering to those in the now will inevitably make the future a better place. Zeke clearly underwent a terrible childhood, having to turn on his parents to survive, living in the terrible conditions forced upon him by racist sentiments, and then being forced to participate in war. It's all terrible, but I think he took the wrong lessons. I agree that he should help the Eldians, but help the Eldians that currently exist. By attempting to save all future Eldians, he's continuing to harm the ones that do exist. Attack on Titan is ethically rich, that much is clear now. So many characters have the viewer asking themselves, do I agree? And I think the character of Zeke exemplifies this almost more than anyone else in the entire series. Zeke acts as an ethical hypothetical to all of us, a moral mirror that has us question why we believe what we believe. I wanted to discuss Zeke and antinatalism so as to show people that ethics are complicated, that what's right and what's wrong are more complex than we often give them credit for, that even if you disagree with Zeke or antinatalists like I do, you still have to present a proper argument. If I can instill anything with this video, besides the fact that moral philosophy is complex, it's that we all need to think a little more about our own ethics, how we formulate them, and how we make moral determinations. So, with all of this now said, I want to again ask you, do you agree with Zeke's plan? Hey there! Thank you for watching the video. I just wanted to jump on here at the end, not only to say thank you, but also to talk about how I reached 1,000 subscribers. It's actually insane that I did it this quickly, at least to me. My previous Attack on Titan video absolutely blew up, so I just wanted to say thank you for all of the support. And I need to give a special thank you to a YouTuber named Librascope. He's been incredibly supportive and he makes fantastic content. So if you like long form content over video games, please check him out. I highly endorse his content. Again, thank you for 1,000 subscribers. And here's to 10,000. Yeah! See you next time.